So what did draw you to politics, and specifically the Labour Party in the first place?
I first joined the party back in the mid-80s when the Longy government was new. I was excited by the change in the air from the Muldoon years. I thought the nuclear-free policy was great. I thought homosexual law reform was an exciting initiative. The whole opening of society was something that really interested me. So that was the initial attraction.
You were a teenager then, of course, weren't you?
I was 15,
yeah,
which was the minimum age that you could join a political party. But
you're not really aware of what we now know of as Rogernomics at that age, are you? You're not particularly economically literate.
And by that,
maybe you were. I don't know.
No, I wasn't. And at that stage, that part of the agenda wasn't so obvious. Later on, particularly during the second term of that government when I was at university, I became very, very concerned about the pace of the change coming from a rural electorate where people were being thrown out of work because the reforms were being implemented so quickly, made me realise that there was something wrong. But my choice was to stay inside the Labour Party and to try to bring about change from within, try to slow down those reforms.
Were you naive up to that point? I mean, how political was your childhood, for instance?
Political with a small p. My parents, both of whom were immigrants to New Zealand, weren't particularly partisan, but they were very aware of what it was like to be in a new country. Mm. And so probably more than in other families, we talked a lot about the issues that excited them and came to their attention from that perspective. So I remember our dinner table was a pretty, I wouldn't say rowdy place, but a place where a lot of ideas were discussed. And
which way did they vote? Because often immigrant people want to identify quite quickly with the establishment, yes, or the status quo, so yes, they can veer slightly right, can't they?
I imagine, like a lot of people in Gisborne in the 70s wanting to fit in, they probably voted National. That changed later on, but...
so you're not a terrible disappointment to them?
Well, I think I'd like to think they'd be pleased about their kids succeeding, whatever the political hue, but I think... as I say, it wasn't a madly partisan environment. It was an environment where issues were discussed, and I think that's where my interest in politics came from.
I was going to ask you whether being of mixed parentage per se was sort of innately politicising to some extent, but it may not have been quite as noticeable in a place like Gisborne.
I think it was interesting that. I certainly didn't never encountered any negative attitudes from peers or from people I was growing up with. But I think it's fair to say that places like Gisborne have come a long way in terms of their understanding of the benefit of having a diverse country is concerned. You
seem to have been a very bright kid. Most likely to succeed?
I think more accurately it would be a question of being given a whole heap of opportunity and being pushed by parents who themselves realised that if they'd stayed in their countries of birth, they'd never have had the opportunities that they got. And one of those big opportunities was education. So they were both incredibly keen for my sister and me to take every advantage, and I think we did. Was it inevitable that you went into the law? Had your father? No, by no means. I went to university not really knowing what I wanted to do. Started a BA, got reasonable marks, and got invited into law school, which is the way it was done at Auckland University in the mid-80s. Seemed like a good idea to give it a go, and I suppose I drifted into it. You've drifted into success at all points. I think the ways in which I've got to where I've got to have been weren't ones that I foresaw at the time. I never thought, for example, I'd end up as a partner in a big law firm. It didn't seem like it would be my cup of tea, but when it happened, I enjoyed it greatly. How hard were you working? I mean, the partners I've met in large law firms burn the candle at both ends sometimes. Yeah, I mean, first of all, you know, the work in the Wellington office of my old firm was great work, but it required dedication and hours that the client needed you to work. And the Sydney office was the same. So, in fact, if anything, on a slightly more intense scale. So
you weren't tempted to stay in Sydney once you'd made the hop to that office?
I thought about it, but I think while Sydney's a great place and Australia has a lot to offer, New Zealand is, on balance, a better place to live. Our quality of life here is on the whole better. My own view of Australia and New Zealand is it's a pointless rivalry to get too wound up in deciding whether you want to live in one or the other. In fact, we both have huge benefits, and but for me it was not a hard thing to come back here.
Being a partner in a large law firm, of course, is some people's main ambition. You could have stayed, reaped the rewards, been comfortable, and grown old and rich. So why choose to make what in some ways looks like out of the frying pan into the fire, in terms of workload anyway, into Parliament?
Sonia Davies, who'd been a big influence on me in my first job, was in her last days, and one of the things she said to me at the time was, look, you're doing very well, it's great, but are you the sort of person who will want to look back on it all after 20 or 30 years and say, well, I made a heap of money? She said, I think you'll want something more than that. And it got me thinking, and I do hope that I'll be able to look back on whatever I end up doing in Parliament and otherwise and be able to say that I did something other than just pile up cash in the bank.
Nice to be able to say that. You make a good story out of, success kind of finding you rather than the other way around and wanting to do something good. But I wonder, how ambitious are you really?
If you want to get things done, and I mean, I don't think most people do go into public life simply because they want to tick the box or get the notch on the belt. I think most people go in because they want to achieve certain things, they want to change things, they want to get things done. And the reality is, the easiest way to get those things done is to be on the front bench of a major political party with a clear idea of what those changes are and how you're going to implement them. And for me, I don't want to be in Parliament forever, but I do want to be there for a period of time such that I can get some things done and leave feeling that I have achieved something.
Are you in a hurry?
I am subject to the will of the electorate as far as when I can get things done is concerned.
Well, also to the will of your colleagues in terms of, should you regain the Treasury benches, getting a cabinet position. I have to quote you, one observer from in 2007, overlooked for cabinet and let his displeasure show, it was said of you. Apparently others don't share his opinion of himself. Is that fair? Can you be conceited?
I hope not. And I wonder whether in particular, that particular commentator's ever given me a particularly fair time. One of the things I haven't done, that some of my colleagues have done, has been assiduous with the press gallery in terms of going around and talking to them about what I want to achieve and what I might have to offer. And I think they've made some judgments accordingly. But I don't think politicians should court the media in that way. I think the media should do their job, find out about people on their merits, and then go and talk to them. And maybe that's a slightly conceited way of looking at things, but I do believe that that is how the media and elected officials should work.
This brings our conversation full circle because, I mean, surely what you've learned so far is that the media has to be courted one way or another. Can you make it work the other way?
Well, I suppose there is something in that, but it's always a tension in terms of how you use your time. If it came to a choice between running around the gallery once a week and flattering a group of journalists versus doing the reading on a particular issue, I know what I would always choose to do.
They'll always be flattered, of course.
Well, they tend to be, and they tend to be very powerful in the position we accord them because they are the prism through which the public see us.
Rob Muldoon once said, you'd be happy if you left New Zealand no worse off than the way you found it, which is a kind of strange ambition when you think about it. What would you like to achieve, just briefly? What would you like to be said about you once this parliamentary career is done?
That in the areas where I was given responsibility, I left New Zealand a better place than I found it.
One up on Rob Muldoon.
Well, what a defeatist way to look at things, that all you could do was sit there and try and stop things from deteriorating.
Good luck with it.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for stopping by. Charles Chauvel.